Welcome back to the channel. Fisker is using the same restructuring advisors as Carvana, and Fisker is doing it outside Chapter 11, and I guess that's a good thing. Let's see what's going on here.
Doodly-doo, doodly-doo.
And the answer, in my opinion, is no. No, Fisker is not the next Carvana.
We are an early-stage company with a history of losses, and we expect to incur significant expenses and continuing losses in the future.
If I'm wrong, I'll just say it. For example, Sean from Fiskerati reached out to me and told me that he would like to clarify he was never a Fisker employee. So I should not have used the word employee, and I really am sorry about that. But what is Carvana anyway? Let's start there. Since this channel focuses on Fisker, before we compare Carvana to Fisker, we got to get caught up on the whole Carvana situation. If you Google Carvana bankruptcy, you're going to find a whole bunch of videos that are about a year old and are all really wrong. Don't watch them. Secondly, I don't like to talk about companies I don't have experience with, but luckily I've sold 4 cars to Carvana in the last 3 years. So I have a pretty good amount of experience with the good side of Carvana, in my opinion, which is the selling side. Full disclosure, I'd never buy a car from Carvana, but they are really, really good for research and market values, as they kind of are the online market themselves.
He says they provided him with this temporary paper plate from Arizona.
There was months where people just didn't have plates, and they were all issued by the state of Arizona, which is the only state that doesn't require a title to get you a temporary plate. I wonder why they're all Arizona.
It's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
So Carvana doesn't have super cool beginnings. And you know I'm not here to waste your time, so very quickly, Ernest Garcia, that's Ernest Garcia II this time, got into some real estate trouble and decided to pivot to cars. And just like you can do subprime loans for homes, you can also do subprime loans for cars. And that was the intent. For $1 million, he bought Ugly Duckling and merged it with his finance company, and the subprime loan sales began. The cars were a physical item that was sold, sure, but the money was in those subprime interest rates. The company is called Drive Time today. Maybe you've seen an ad.
Look, there's a slidey thingy. I'm changing my own payments.
After building a successful company for several years, then came Garcia III. He eventually joined the family business, and during this time, he realized that the trend was just online. People are researching cars online, but they're not buying online because there's no real place to do it, and Ernest III thought, this is the place. Let's launch Carvana. The car vending machine was the gimmick.
Quick question. The solar panels on the roof. Some are going to look at that and say, nice gimmick. How much does it really add in terms of mileage?
Well, you know, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
But he was really onto something with the online sales thing. And from Garcia II's successful business, Drive Time, and those financial instruments, Carvana had pretty good backing. Remember, we're summarizing here. Fast forward to the pandemic. Carvana had a perfect storm of circumstances take place. The chip shortage caused new cars to be impossible to get, and the used car market exploded. Interest rates were still low, and Carvana decided to expand to take advantage of this perfect set of circumstances for their business model. And they expanded quite a lot, which also caused some hiccups, titling issues in Michigan and Illinois, and some complaints. But it was the pandemic, and it didn't matter what you bet on in 2021. You picked right. Carvana was one of those companies, and the share price went through the roof. Carvana had not made a profit to this point, but the business model was there, and the investors saw that. We all know now the pandemic was an anomaly. We're in the process of getting back to normal world operating economy procedures. And when Carvana expanded, they bet a lot on inventory. And they had big inventory that they paid big money for, pandemic prices. That meant they were upside down on their inventory, and the market was kind of turning around as well. Cars weren't so hot. Of course, there was nowhere to go but down. Nobody had a car on the lot in 2021, no matter what car or what lot. And when these circumstances flipped and the perfect storm turned into a horrible problem, that's when everybody thought Carvana was gonna go under. It was inevitable. But then something happened. Carvana saw the writing on the wall, and because they have experience in the financial sector, especially with these loans, they really know what loans are about. And they took advantage. They had massive debt and needed a restructuring right away, but unlike Fisker, they didn't want someone to buy them out. They wanted to stay who they were. So they came with the poison pill first. This prevents a hostile takeover and protected Carvana from bankruptcy. And this was a special poison pill, a net operating loss poison pill, which is a tax thing. And remember, I'm summarizing here. This is the KISS method, the keep it super simple, let's say, because a null poison pill could be an entire video. But Basically, nobody can own more than 4.9% of Carvana's shares for the next 3 years or so based on this plan. And the reason is to prevent the enacting of IRS Code 382, which would hurt net operating loss tax benefits. Remember, I'm just explaining Carvana using the keep it super simple method. This type of move does suggest a more defensive stance by Carvana's board of directors and likely eliminates any potential future institutions from gaining ownership control. Analysts at Raymond James said in a note, after the poison pill or around the same time, Carvana sold $4 billion worth of loans to Ally Bank. You see, just like DriveTime, Carvana was a car company and a loan company. And when it was advantageous for them, instead of selling off the loans right away, they kind of held on to them. And they had a substantial amount when all this trouble started. The sale of the loans was a nice cash infusion, but that wasn't enough. They needed to flip the rest of their debt too. Because around the same time, they bought ADESA, which was a $2 billion acquisition, and then they invested another $1 billion plus into revamping their entire wholesale operation. So now Carvana's in the wholesale game. That's super advantageous for them because, well, they sell cars. In 2022, Carvana was expanding and doing Super Bowl ads and doing everything they can to sell as many cars as possible. But in 2023, they did this restructuring. They slowed their advertising. Sales slowed as well. However, that ADESA acquisition was extremely beneficial because now profits were up per unit because, well, they had access to the wholesale market. And by Q2 of 2023, they were making $5,900 per car gross profit, $600 net profit, which was kind of a first for Carvana. So how did this restructuring save them? Did they just make all this debt disappear? No, they punted.
He looked like he hurt himself.
And what do I mean by punt? Paid in kind. You know the debt ceiling? Well, in case you don't follow the news, every few months the government is about to shut down because we're going to reach our new debt ceiling. And instead of a bipartisan plan to either eliminate the debt ceiling or do something reasonable that doesn't just extend it a couple months, we just punt and kick the problem down the road a few more months. This is exactly how the paid-in-kind restructuring works. Carvana took the debt they had. Some people didn't want to restructure, so they stayed where they were and then agreed to pay the rest even more later than the later they had already agreed to, which was like 2030. Now it goes to 2031 and beyond, and the interest rates go through the roof for at least the very recent future. But instead of paying the interest in cash, they paid the interest in more notes.
For a hamburger today.
That's right. No cash expense for interest, just more debt for later. The whole problem with all this debt they had was they couldn't afford to pay the interest, and the interest expense that Carvana is currently incurring is more than it was before the restructuring. It's just they don't have to pay it in cash right now.
Today.
Here it is in cookies. You sold Carvana cookies on loan, which means you gave them cookies and they didn't pay you, and instead of paying you money for the cookies, they gave you back different cookies instead, which you can't sell, but they agree to buy back from you at a later time. In addition to paying you the money for the previously sold cookies. There's your keep it super simple, paid in kind explanation. So, a punt.
He looked like he hurt himself.
It's fourth down, and we can definitely go on fourth down, but instead we're just going to give you the ball and try a whole new set of downs at a later time. Finally, because Carvana had complaints about titling and registration and things of that nature, well, they weren't expanding anymore, and they were able to focus on getting those problems solved, so they've been able to kind of reduce that problem. The previous problems that happened still exist, but there don't seem to be a whole lot of new problems popping up, at least in the news. So let's sum it up. Carvana was never viable until recently. They convinced investors to buy based on potential future success, they advertised heavily, and used the pandemic to leverage their growth. And during that time, they bought into market segments that could further increase their potential profit per unit. Once their perfect storm of good circumstances changed, they needed to restructure their debt. They were able to do that by using their new market segment, understanding the advantages and disadvantages of debt and how to take advantage of it, limit single investor ownership through a poison pill strategy, switch their interest payments from cash to in-kind, and continue to exist with board members and large investors knowing that bankruptcy is kind of the worst case scenario for them, so whatever they had to do to avoid that. Carvana is still in trouble, but for the next couple years, they've got an opportunity to get everything together. And based on Q1 2024 results, they kind of have. They had a profitable quarter with $49 million in net income. Sales were up, and so was gross profit, but as you can see in their cash flow statement, they paid $142 million in in-kind interest expense.
For a hamburger today.
The stocks are currently on a tear, and I don't do financial advice, but if you're in, you might want to get out before these in-kind payments turn to cash. But they have a wholesale element, they have inventory, they have assets. There's a chance they might survive. Now let's look at that contrast between Carvana and Fisker. And I've covered this a lot on this channel, but if you're new here, start with this video. It's a breakdown of Fisker's current financial situation, and most of it is still really relevant right now. Fisker is out of money, owes millions of dollars immediately. Their assets have been written down, which basically means the appraised value is much lower, to the point where they can no longer profit on the products they sell. They don't have enough money to pay their employees, so almost everyone's been laid off, except for some service people. And in the event a restructuring occurs, Susquehanna is going to take everything first. And the only chance anyone gets anything else is in the event that there's money left over after all of the IP and other assets has been absorbed by this company. If a company wants to buy them, that's also in the notes. They would have to make right all the debt obligations. I can make this really complex, but it doesn't have to be. Fisker was also not profitable at launch. The investors got in based on salesmanship and potential instead of figures on the books. The pandemic market conditions created a great opportunity. It was a growth market and EVs were the thing to invest in. And then it takes a turn. Fisker did not acquire relevant market competition. Upon identifying financial shortcomings, they didn't identify their financial shortcomings. They didn't have a chief accounting officer to do so. The accounting officers just quit. They did not negotiate with stakeholders to create an acceptable plan. In fact, the communication is right on the border of legal, maybe, and they definitely did not take necessary actions to prevent acquisition. They defaulted on basically everything, including their very last extremely small loan. So where Carvana was experienced and seasoned and made the right choices to stay alive, Fisker stumbled and miscommunicated or didn't communicate and defaulted over and over again. There was only one relevant stakeholder, and it was CVI Investments, which is under the umbrella of Susquehanna, and that's it. Carvana has assets. Fisker does not. I mean, there's these unsold oceans out there, but in the same vein, these assets are not profitable. Carvana just flipped the game and started making a profit. Fisker just started offering post-retail units to their employees for $50,000 discounts.
For a hamburger today.
There's no chance to profit on this car. Carvana acquired Odessa. Fisker vehicles are sitting at Odessa because it's the quickest place to offload them when they absolutely have to, which could be very soon.
It's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
Carvana didn't want to go bankrupt or be acquired. Fisker didn't have a chance to make a decision because it was already too late and the entire business was already in the control of their debtor, the CVI Investments Susquehanna umbrella note holder. So, when people say that Fisker is going to restructure the same way Carvana did, Fisker doesn't have $4 billion in loans to sell. They don't have an established company behind them financially, they don't have a billionaire dad, and they don't have any profitable products. Oh, and did I mention they don't have any control anymore? Fisker could continue to exist as an entity of CVI Investments, but what will it be? There won't be anything left to sell, except a few patents and a copy of a Chinese car platform that's probably coming to the US in a cheaper version anyway, sometime in the next 5 to 7 years, with complete software, regardless of what tariffs we try to stop it with. So, what did I miss and what's your take? Let me know down in the comments below. Join Patreon or become a YouTube member for early access to videos. Subscribe for more, and we'll see ya on the next one.
Hey! Smash the like button.
Thank you.